This is Michael, KC9PHK, returning on behalf of 5.9 Radio. Thank you for following along. Hopefully our slides will be of benefit so you can obtain your new general class license in 2023. If you're not already subscribed, I want to remind you that the 5.9 Radio channel features a variety of topics and videos, hamfests, slides like these. All right, let's get on to these slides. We have a little over 100 slides, and let's get it done as quick as we can so that the video is shorter. Subelement G9 covers antennas and feed. 4 exam questions come from the 4 groups. G9A, feed lines, characteristic impedance and attenuation, standing wave ratio calculation, measurement and effects, and antenna feed line matching. G9A01, which of the following factors determines the characteristic impedance of a parallel conductor feed line? The distance between the centers of the conductors and the radius of the conductors. G9A02, what is the relationship between high standing wave ratio, also known as SWR, and transmission line loss? High SWR increases loss in a lossy transmission line. G9A09, what is the nominal characteristic impedance of window line transmission line? It's going to be 450 ohms. G9A04, what causes reflected power at an antenna's feed point? That's going to be a difference between the feed line impedance and antenna feed point impedance. G9A05, how does the attenuation of coax change with increased frequency? Attenuation increases. G9A06, in what units is RF feed line loss usually expressed? That's decibels per 100 feet. G9A07, what must be done to prevent standing waves on a feed line connected to an antenna? The antenna feed line impedance must be matched to the characteristic impedance of the feed line. G9A08, if the SWR of an antenna feed line is 5:1, and a matching network at the transmitter end of the feed line is adjusted to present a 1:1 SWR to the transmitter, what is the resulting SWR on the feed line? That's going to be 5:1. G9A09, what standing wave ratio results from connecting a 50 ohm feed line to a 200 ohm resistive load? That's going to be 4:1. G9A10, what standing wave ratio results from connecting a 50 ohm feed line to a 10 ohm resistive load? It's going to be 5:1, 5:1. G9A11, what is the effect of transmission line loss on SWR measured at the input to the line? Higher loss reduces SWR measured at the input to the line. G9B covers basic dipole and monopole antennas. G9B01, what is a characteristic of a random wire HF antenna connected directly to the transmitter? Station equipment may carry significant RF current. G9B02, which of the following is a common way to adjust the feed point impedance of an elevated quarter wave ground plane vertical antenna to be approximately 50 ohms? Slope the radials downward. G9B03, which of the following describes the radiation pattern of a quarter wave ground plane vertical antenna? It's omnidirectional in azimuth. G9B04, what is the radiation pattern of a dipole antenna in free space in a plane containing the conductor? It is a figure 8 at right angles to the antenna. G9B05, how does the antenna height affect the azimuthal radiation pattern of a horizontal dipole HF antenna? If the antenna is less than 1/2 wavelength high, the azimuthal pattern is almost omnidirectional. G9B06, where should the radial wires of a ground-mounted vertical antenna system be placed? On the surface or buried a few inches below the ground? G9B07, how does the feed point impedance of a horizontal half-wave dipole antenna change as the antenna height is reduced to 1/10 wavelength above ground? It steadily decreases. G9B08, How does the feed point impedance of a half-wave dipole change as the feed point is moved from the center towards the ends? It steadily increases. G9B09, which of the following is an advantage of using a horizontally polarized as compared to a vertically polarized HF antenna? Lower ground losses. G9B10, what is the approximate length of a half-wave dipole antenna cut for 14.250 megahertz? It's going to be 33 feet. 33 feet. G9B11, what is the approximate length of a half-wave dipole antenna cut for 3.550 megahertz? 132 feet. 132. G9B12, what is the approximate length of a quarter-wave monopole antenna cut for 28.5 megahertz? 8 feet. G9C covers directional antennas. Directional antennas. G9C01, which of the following would increase the bandwidth of a Yagi antenna? Larger diameter elements. G9C02, what is the approximate length of the driven element of a Yagi antenna? And it's half wavelength. 1/2 wavelength. G9C03, how do the lengths of a 3-element Yagi reflector and director compare to that of the driven element? The reflector is longer and the director is shorter. G9C04, how does antenna gain in dBi compare to gain stated in dBd for the same antenna? Gain in dBi is 2.15 dB higher. G9C05, what is the primary effect of increasing boom length and adding directors to a Yagi antenna? Gain increases. G9C06, how does the forward gain of a 2-element quad antenna compare to the forward gain of a 3-element Yagi antenna? It's about the same. G9C07, what does the front-to-back ratio mean in reference to a Yagi antenna? The power radiated in the major lobe compared to that in the opposite direction. G9C08, what is meant by the main lobe of a directive antenna? The direction of maximum radiated field strength from the antenna. G9C09, how does the gain of 2 3-element horizontally polarized Yagi antennas spaced vertically half wavelength apart typically compared to the gain of a single 3-element Yagi? Approximately 3 dB gain, or 3 dB higher. G9C10, which of the following can be adjusted to optimize forward gain, front-to-back ratio, and SWR bandwidth of a Yagi antenna? On this one, it is all of the choices are correct. So the physical length of the boom, the number of elements on the boom, and the spacing of each element along the boom are all correct. So the answer you need to select on the test is all of the above. G9C11, what is a beta or hairpin match? Answer is a shorted transmission line stub placed at the feed point of a Yagi antenna to provide impedance matching. G9C12, which of the following is characteristic of using a gamma match with a Yagi antenna? It does not require the driven element to be insulated from the boom. G9D, specialized antenna system, antenna types and applications. G9D01, which of the following antenna systems will be most effective as a near vertical incident skywave antenna for short skip communications on 40 meters during the day? A horizontal dipole placed between 1/10 and 1/4 wavelength above the ground. G9B02, what is the feed point impedance of a half-fed half-wave antenna? An end-fed half-wave antenna, and that's very high. G9B03, in which direction is the maximum radiation from a VHF-UHF halo antenna? And that's going to be omnidirectional in the plane of the halo. G9B04, what is the primary function of antenna traps? To enable multi-band operation. A lot of your HF antennas have antenna traps. G9D05, what is an advantage of vertically stacking horizontally polarized Yagi antennas? It narrows the main lobe in elevation. G9D06, which of the following is an advantage of a log periodic antenna? Wide bandwidth. G9D07, which of the following describes a log periodic antenna? Element length and spacing vary logarithmically along the boom. G9D08, how does a screwdriver mobile antenna adjust its feed point impedance? By varying the base loading inductance. G9D09, what is the primary use of a beverage antenna? Directional receiving for low HF antennas. G9D10, in which direction or directions does an electrically small loop, less than 1/3 wavelength in circumference, have nulls in its radiation pattern? That's going to be in the broadside to the loop. G9D11, which of the following is a disadvantage of multiband antennas? They have poor harmonic rejection. G9D12, what is the common name of a dipole with a single central support? Inverted V. Subelement G0, two groups. G0 is over electrical and RF safety. G0A covers RF safety principles, rules, guidelines, routine station evaluation. G0A01, what is one way that RF energy can affect human body tissue? It heats body tissue. G0A02, which of the following is used to determine RF exposure from a transmitted signal? And that's all of the above. So it's duty cycle, its frequency, and its power density. G0A03, how can you determine that your station complies with the FCC RF exposure regulations? This is another, all of these choices are correct. So by calculations based on FCC OET Bulletin 65, by calculation based on computer modeling, or by measurement of field strength using calibrated equipment. G0A04, what does time averaging mean when evaluating RF radiation exposure? That's the total RF exposure averaged over a certain time. G0A05, what must you do if an evaluation of your station shows that the RF energy radiated by your station exceeds permissible limits for possible human absorption? Take action to prevent human exposure to the excessive RF fields. G0A06, what must you do if your station fails to meet the FCC RF exposure exemption criteria? Perform an RF exposure evaluation in accordance with the FCC OET Bulletin 65. G0A07, what is the effect of modulation duty cycles on RF exposure? A lower duty cycle permits greater power levels to be transmitted. G0A08, which of the following steps must an amateur operator take to ensure compliance with RF safety regulations? Perform a routine RF exposure evaluation and prevent access to any identified high exposure areas. G0A09, what type of instrument can be used to accurately measure an RF field strength? A calibrated field strength meter with a calibrated antenna. G0A10, what should be done if evaluation shows that a neighbor might experience more than the allowable limit of RF exposure from the main lobe of a directional antenna? Take precautions to ensure that the antenna cannot be pointed in their direction when they're present. G0A11, which precautions should be taken if you install an indoor transmitting antenna? Make sure that MPE limits are not exceeded in occupied areas. G0A12, what stations are subject to the FCC rules on RF exposure? That's all stations with a time average transmission of more than 1 milliwatt. G0B covers station safety, electrical shock, grounding, fusing, interlocks, and wiring, antenna and tower safety. G0B01, which wire or wires in a four-conductor 240-volt AC circuit should be attached to fuses or circuit breakers? Only the hot wires. G0B02, according to the National Electrical Code, what is the minimum wire size that may be used safely for wiring with 20 ampere circuit breaker? And that's AWG number 12. G0B03, what size of fuse or circuit breaker would be appropriate to use with a circuit that uses AWG number 14 wiring. It's going to be 15 amperes. G0B04, where should the station's lightning protection ground system be located? Outside the building. G0B05, which of the following conditions will cause a ground fault circuit interrupter to disconnect AC power? Current flowing from one or more of the hot wires directly to ground. G0B06, which of the following is covered by the National Electrical Code? Electrical safety of the station. G0B07, which of the following choices should be observed when climbing a tower using a safety harness? And you're going to confirm that the harness is rated for the weight of the climber and it is within its allowable service life. G0B08, what should be done before climbing a tower that supports electrically powered devices? Make sure all circuits that supply power to the tower are locked out and tagged. G0B09, which of the following is true of an emergency generator installation? The generator should be operated in a well-ventilated area. G0B10, which of the following is a danger from lead tin solder? Lead can contaminate food if hands are not washed carefully after handling the solder. G0B11, which of the following is required for lightning protection ground rods? They must be bonded together with all other grounds. G0B12, what is the purpose of a power supply interlock? To ensure that dangerous voltages are removed if the cabinet is opened. G0B13, where should lightning arresters be located? That's where the feed lines enter the building. Alright, that ends the 2023 to 2027 General Class Question Pool. Thanks for joining 5-9 Radio and myself, Michael, KC9PHK, on this journey. Hopefully you enjoy these videos. Give us your comments, give us your likes. We really do like putting these out there. And again, in the description I'll include the slides so that if clubs want to use them for their own purposes. Again, thank you.